And good evening, everyone. Thank you here for joining us for our virtual town hall on homelessness. I'm Preston Phillips, anchor here at KOMO News. We thought this would be a great opportunity to talk about how the homelessness crisis is going here in Seattle and how things are shaping up here at the end of the year. We have a wonderful group of panelists for you to join in and listen to today. We're just going to have a conversation about how things are going as the year ends and wraps up here in 2022. So with us today, we have Andrea Suarez, the founder and executive director of We Heart Seattle, described as an action-based, boots-on-the-ground movement that organizes trash cleanups in public spaces, offers resources to those in need. Along the ground, a lot of homeless outreach with Andrea Suarez and her group. Then John Scholes, the president and CEO of the Downtown Seattle Association, and how they describe themselves. They're responsible for the operations and programs of the DSA, which is a 650-member association formed in 1958 to create a healthy, vibrant downtown. And then we have Tanya Woo, a business owner in the Chinatown-International District, also a very active voice in Little Saigon, and the Chinatown-International District also does a lot of homeless outreach. So we have a lot to get to today. We have a lot of information here and a lot of knowledge here to just kind of give us a walkthrough of how things are going here in Seattle. I do want to point out before we get to everything, we did reach out to the King County Regional Homelessness Authority. We had several conversations. No one was able to make it today. We also talked with the city office, the mayor's office, had multiple conversations. No one was able to make it from there as well. But we have a great panel here today to talk about this and some very important situations here in downtown Seattle and the surrounding areas. So we'll just start with this, and we'll start with you, John, with the Downtown Seattle Association. We've seen a lot of tents, a lot of the encampments being moved, and people get into housing. And downtown Seattle does appear to be looking much better. How is it looking from your perspective? If you were to go down and visit downtown Seattle right now, what would you see?
Yeah, I'm downtown right now, Preston. I live downtown. I work downtown. I spend a lot of time downtown, and I'm more encouraged now than I've been in many, many months. And we're in a much better position than we've been, certainly than a year ago, certainly than 2 years ago, and even, comparing us to 8 months ago. A year ago, we had 150 plus tents, individuals living in tents in neighborhoods throughout downtown. Today, by our count, we've got about 20 or so. So we still have a lot of challenges, no doubt. There's people sleeping outside that aren't in tents, but we have fewer tents, fewer encampments, fewer people living on the streets than we did a year ago. I think we're moving in the right direction, and we need to continue to stay focused on this crisis so that we can help bring more people inside. This is really a team and community effort, and we all have a role to play to ensure that our neighborhood in downtown is safe and welcoming for everybody.
And Andrea and Tanya, I know you guys do a lot of homeless outreach. I know one question a lot of people have is, we see people getting off the streets, the tents going away, people getting into housing. Where are these people going? Either one of you can take this, but a lot of people want to know just where are they going? Are they going into hotels? It seems like, they're getting off the streets, but where do they go from here, and where are a majority of those people landing?
Well, thank you for having us, Preston. I'll chime in here that today we actually went just on the fringe of downtown in the Soto district and counted more than 250 tents and over 50 RVs. So while downtown was looking very encouraging and better, and I would agree with John that I also live downtown. Our offices are on 3rd Avenue. I live in Belltown. That there are less tents, but we are seeing people just moving to the fringe of downtown.
So you're kind of just on the outskirts. So they're leaving the downtown area, but they're still around living in those encampments and still unsheltered, not into housing specifically.
There are some people getting into housing. I think King County Regional Housing Authority reported that they had 4 people that they got into apartments. I can't remember, that was a couple weeks ago. I know they're working hard to process those housing vouchers. But what I'm hearing is that there's just a lot of paperwork, and there's still a staffing shortage throughout these housing projects to process the paperwork. And that's a lot of the feedback I get when we try to refer people to the various housing projects that we have access to.
Well, it's interesting. When you go to the city's website, it shows you the verified tent and RV encampment snapshot. And you can't see it from here, but it shows you all of the tent encampments that have been closed, RV sites that have been resolved. And when you see that, it seems like, well, problem solved, at least in these spots. Is the problem solved? I mean, Tanya, from where you're coming from, the Chinatown-International District in that area, are you seeing any improvements up there?
I I believe that we're seeing some improvements. It was a lot better than a year ago where we had 12th and Jackson, we had 100 people out in the streets. But it seems like people are just getting moved around. You know, the 12th and Jackson group, they move around behind Lamb Seafood down to King and 8th. It's still the same group. And then also our encampments, they come in, the city comes in and sweeps them, but they come back up the next day. The tents are back up. And, you know, there has been some movement. We've seen people who found housing and come back and let us know they're doing great, and they come to visit their friends who are still currently unhoused. But yet there is a great need. Our encampments are still very popular, especially during the summertime. Now that it's winter, they're mostly indoors in their tents. You don't see them out and about as much anymore. But, you know, we still have a lot of people sleeping in doorways, sleeping in our parks. And so the need is very great. I think there has been a big difference. The Unified Care Team, I'm really interested to see how that rolls out the next year in terms of budget-wise, if that's how that is being funded and prioritized. We had an 8-week trial period for the Unified Care Team where they came in and did garbage pickups for 7 days a week, graffiti abatement, try to clean up the area. That has helped a lot, but, you know, that hasn't really affected much of the unhoused community. And so, you know, it's interesting because we do have that large shelter at the border of Soto and the CID, and we have about 15 to 16 shelter services within 1 mile of the CID. And yet, you know, we still see like a huge amount of unhoused in the area. And, you know, we think sometimes we see there's a little bit of a dent, but then, you know, that community just pops right back up. And so I don't know if the city or the county is doing a good job of really getting down to the base issue of why people are unhoused, which I think is, you know, the drug epidemic is huge, especially with the fentanyl sales, addiction and pain that people feel. That has not seen much of a difference in terms of, you know, what's happening in the CID.
Well, we did a story just a few days ago. I think it was on Friday that we did it, maybe Thursday or Friday, about the surge in deaths of homeless people on the streets has gone way up this year from last year. And a big reason for that was the drug overdoses, the fentanyl, the meth, the drugs that these people are using out there and being regularly trafficked into the areas. It's a huge problem. And I know, John, things are getting better downtown, but the majority of the stories that we're seeing here are still people being busted for these large amount of drug deals. How is that impacting the businesses down there? Because I know people are still impacted, especially like 3rd and Pine, and those areas continue to be trouble spots. How is that continuing to impact people down there who are doing business?
Yeah, I think we, in many ways, have used homelessness as sort of a shorthand for human suffering outside, whether it's mental illness or substance use disorder or other behavioral health issues. And we should, I think, be real honest with what we're seeing out there. We're certainly seeing people that need a home, that don't have the economics, the employment. They have some trauma in their life where they have lost access to housing. And then we have folks who may be housed, but they have a severe mental health or substance use disorder, and they're spending a lot of time outside. And I think we need to apply the right intervention, the right service, the right set of treatments. Maybe it's an inpatient bed and not, a shelter bed for somebody who's dealing with severe mental illness. So we have a lot of broken and systems that are inefficient and aren't well resourced. The mental health system, our drug treatment system, and the prescription of housing is maybe not the end all and be all for folks that are in those situations. And we certainly see that in parts of our city and certainly in downtown of too much, substance use and too many folks dealing with behavioral health issues. And they might be housed in some cases, but they have a really severe substance use disorder as well.
And so what I'm hearing is, things are definitely looking better because you can drive down the street and things definitely look better. You see, fewer tents popping up, but you do see tents in spots and not gigantic encampments like we were having with fires. And, the Mercer encampment was cleared, that was moved. Those people had to go somewhere. And Andrew, we talk about, people are getting housing referrals. They go to housing possibly, and we see talks about new housing developments come up and things like that. But is there a solution here that works better that's not being employed? Because it seems to me like, based on what you guys are saying, is that people are just kind of being moved around more than actually being housed and then being helped so that they don't continue the cycle of homelessness.
I mean, I would just jump in there, Preston. I don't think people are being moved around, and no one really wants to see that. No business owner is asking somebody just to get off my property, move to the next block, because they know that that's not a solution. We are moving people into housing at a greater rate in this city than we have in many, many years. I want to credit the mayor and others who are doing that work. Just moving folks from one park to the other is not a solution that anybody wants to see, not for their own neighborhood, not for the park, and not certainly for the folks in need. We need to move much faster to build more housing and respond to this crisis with more urgency. But we are making some progress here in bringing people inside. The numbers are clear there. We're not just moving people from downtown to Soto or Soto to Ballard. And that's not a solution anybody that I talk to believes in.
Well, and it's noticeable. I mean, you definitely want these people to get help. You don't want them to continue that cycle. They want to get the help. Some of them don't want to get off the streets, clearly. But at the same time, a lot of people do want the help, and getting that help is a huge solution to this, and finding that pathway. Andrea, when you look at these people, you talk to these people, what seems to be the biggest issue or most difficult part of trying to get them to a place that can give them a path to the straight and narrow?
Well, I would say that in hearing from the mayor, actually, he was at the luncheon at the Rotary 4 last Wednesday in person, and his ratings are high. He's doing a great job. He's our new linebacker. He's our captain. And downtown's much better than it was. But he said the F word, and that's fentanyl. Mm-hmm. And I was happy that a city leader is addressing the drugs. What I would describe downtown a year ago, or our parks, Denny Park, Ballard Commons, Woodland Park, are open air drug scenes. Mm-hmm. It's not that those folks didn't even have housing. I find with my boots on the ground that if I had $1 for everybody that said, I'm fine, I have housing, I just hang out here, I could retire. Because a lot of people are occupying our streets, occupying the Blade, 3rd Avenue, those fencing markets, the jungle, and those parks that have housing. These were their communities. This is the open air drug scene that Mayor Harrell also called out by name. And that pleased me, that he's talking about the drug scene and fentanyl. And until we get a solution around that, which are more aggressive arrests. And when I say arrest, I don't mean incarcerate forever as a solution. Arrest just means stop that behavior now. Stop smoking fentanyl on our city streets and our shared spaces, and get help. And part of our outreach is to connect people into those resources. And you can, there's Providence, there's Valley, there's Royal, there are beds. You have to get up every morning and dial it. And I think that's what good outreach and assertive outreach is doing. Tanya certainly does that as well, I'm sure. But I was pleased to hear him talk about courageous compassion, if I could quote him, since his office isn't here. And just to put you in that room with the mayor, in 10 years, I've heard that Rotarians only give standing ovations maybe 5 times, and he was given a standing ovation for his work and his team in our city.
Tanya, when you're talking with people out there and you're going boots on the ground to some of these homeless encampments and having those conversations, and those people are still on the streets, what's the most difficult part for them, or the biggest hurdle, if you will, in trying to get into a place that gives them a better life so they can get out of that life that they're in the cold and around all the drugs and those types of things?
Sometimes we see a little bit of a vicious cycle where we're not seeing culturally competent resources for many of the unhoused in the CID. And we see people cycle in and out of the system, and it's a little bit unfortunate to see somebody who's been fighting their behavioral health issues or addictions for the last 20 years and who are not getting help that they need. And so I think it's really important for a lot of interagency communication, making sure that there are not any overlaps, that no one's being missed. And so it's been really interesting to see what KCRJ's plan is in the upcoming year. For the CID community, we're kind of advocating for a 5-year plan, especially for that community, because I think our issues are a little bit different, a little unique, in a way, in terms of what we're seeing with our unhoused community. And just having that transparency and accountability and seeing the statistics on what works and what doesn't work. We have the Navigation Center inside the little Saigon borders. And so trying to get accessibility to anyone there or to their success rates is a little bit difficult sometimes. And being able to have that and a partnership with the community is really important because, there are a lot of community groups, especially in the CID, the A Girls, for instance, who will go out into the encampments and provide services and try to meet the unhoused community needs with a lot of empathy and compassion. And yet, being able to help these community-based groups in terms of, funding, in terms of the work they do, and also, working with the community on neighborhood plan, because I think, in order to help the unhoused community, be successful in terms of healing, in terms of what they're fighting and finding housing, it's going to take everybody, not just, KCRJ or lead or co-lead, but good communication, working together, and, helping each other.
I know recently
really
it was a big deal, and it was a pretty tough situation with the expansion or the proposed expansion of the homeless shelter down by where you guys are, Tanya, and CID. And how is the relationship with you guys now in the county? And are things better now? I think it was pretty contentious there for a little while as that was coming up because you guys had said nothing was brought to your attention about this, and then it was a huge deal. And then you guys were a big part of this, especially you, Tanya, and making sure that didn't happen until obviously more information comes out and you guys have that better dialogue. How's the relationship now?
It's a work in progress still. I mean, we were not anti-shelter. We just wanted more communication, a seat at the table. We wanted KCRJ and the Salvation Army to talk to us, let us know what's going on. And so, we're no one was happy with the stoppage of the shelter expansion. And, we especially had a lot of questions. We didn't feel that KCRJ, one size fits all, put everybody into a congregate shelter was the answer. There are different needs for our unhoused community. If you go in there and ask people where they're coming from, where do they live, why did they get here, how come they're not going into the Soto shelter, everyone will give you a different answer. And so, especially with that encampment right outside the doors of the shelter, in terms of, being able to do outreach to that group, what's going on there. And we haven't really had much communication with them. So we're still working on possibly meeting with them.
Yeah, good. So you look at the city of Seattle's homelessness budget. This has gone up or increased by 125% over the last 4 years. I mean, in 2018 it was 77 million, and now it's 173 million in 2022. You can see kind of the pie chart here as to where all that money is being spent. 118 million with the King County Regional Homelessness Authority. We talk about housing, we talk about all of those things, but when you look at this, really, unless you break the cycle in a lot of these situations of the drug use and those habit-forming things that cause people to want to stay on the streets and not want to go into housing, maybe because they have to live by a certain rule in some spots, I guess, if you will. We talk about this, and I know a lot of people will comment online when someone's arrested for a big drug bust or fentanyl pills, 50,000 fentanyl pills here and there. We hear that story all the time, but I think a lot of people will see that and be like, wow, nothing's going to happen to that person. They're just going to get arrested, put in jail, and then they're out the next day. Is there a solution to this? Because it just keeps seeming to feed all of these homeless encampments and continue to just this cycle over and over and over and over again, this vicious cycle of drug addiction that continues, or it seems to continue, to fuel the problems that we're seeing on the streets. Is there any solution to that can be employed with all of this money that's being thrown at the homeless problem here?
Well, I would say, Preston, we clearly have to address not only the demand side and offer treatment to those that are on the street suffering, but we've got to deal with the supply side too. And I think we are seeing a higher level of coordination between the U.S. Attorney's Office, DEA, SPD, the King County Prosecutor's Office to go after those folks that are funneling poison into this community, and guns and money and everything else that goes along with this illegal operation that is putting the lives of thousands of people at risk and killing 100,000+ people in our country on an annual basis now. A record number of people will die from overdoses in this country this year, and same in King County. We're on that pace. So we have to deal with the supply side too and go after the folks that are funneling this poison onto our sidewalks and streets. There was a significant operation and a series of arrests just a month and a half ago or so within a number of areas of Seattle that the SPD and the U.S. Attorney's Office and others were involved in. We need to continue to see that focus and the resources going to those that are bringing in these illicit drugs that have severe consequences for those that get their hands on them.
Yeah, just severe. And you see Homeland Security investigations working with SPD and other police departments in the city. You really do see them coming together, John. So, I mean, what you're saying, we do watch that, and it's great to watch that, because when you see that stopped, I think the cycle of everything we've been watching over the years happen here in Seattle, that can slowly come to an end. And once that cycle of addiction and the fentanyl and all that stuff can be choked out and kept off our streets, I think we'll see a even much bigger improvement than what we've been seeing. But when you look at downtown Seattle now, say for instance, if we've talked about this before in past town halls about safety, and over the last couple of years, especially with COVID and the shutting down of businesses, with the lining of tents on the streets, we saw shootings and all sorts of things. It felt very dangerous, at least over the last few years, to take your family down to downtown Seattle. But it seems like it's getting a little bit safer, like to where it's not like it used to be. And I know we're talking about improvements. How do you see it, John? I know you represent a lot of businesses. Obviously, you're not going to say it's the most dangerous place in the world, but honestly, from a dad's perspective, or a family man, someone who would take their kids down there and lives there, how do you see things now? And would you say to a family, it's an okay place to be, and I think that you'd be safe if you came down here and shopped?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would acknowledge that 2 years ago, it was an absolute mess. And the city and county, in many ways, it abandoned our downtown from a law enforcement, public safety, human service perspective. It was kind of this anything goes mentality, and anything went often in downtown during that period. But we're in a much different place today. There were 2 million plus people that were down here in November, visitors from other parts of the county or the state or the country, not folks who live or work here. We've had record hotel occupancy over the summer relative to other parts of the country. We've got great holiday attractions and events and traditions that are back. It's a good time to be downtown. No doubt we still have challenges. You will see people that are still suffering because they don't have a home, because they might have an addiction, because they have a behavioral health issue. But I'd say on balance, this is a safe and welcoming neighborhood, and we're headed in the right direction. I think because of the leadership we have in this city, the mayor and others that are committed to these issues. And we're working together, the business community, the public sector, the civic community, to create a downtown and a heart of our city that's safe and welcoming for everybody.
Yeah, definitely. And Andrea, you might be able to answer this, and this is a question I know people have asked in recent weeks, but when you see people getting pushed off the streets into housing or wherever they might be going, I know that, let me end this real quick here, hang on. We got a few minutes left on this thing. Bill, will you put okay on that so we can get that off the screen? Got a few minutes left, but before we get to an end here, I did want to ask you, Andrea, and I know you work primarily in Seattle, is that correct? I mean, do you work outside? And I guess one of the questions I have is regarding some people being moved off the streets. We talk about homeless shelters and motels, in Everett and places like that, and talking about moving people up to spots like that where those are being put in place so that there's more places for people to stay. Have you had any experience seeing people moved off the streets into places like Everett? Do you have any any insight into that?
Yeah, of course. I have clients. We have a case management load at WeHeart, and just to kind of go back on the public safety question, people are getting arrested. They're not in their camps. They're not in their homes. People are getting 5 years for organized retail theft. I'm seeing it. I'm seeing people go bye-bye for a long time. Yep. And that's changing the whole ecosystem downtown, and people are skedaddling big time, but they are going somewhere else. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And if you look on next door and scroll down through to the neighborhoods outside of downtown, it's porch pirating, smash and grabs, bank robberies, shootings. Mm-hmm. So that still is all happening in our neighborhoods. And people who do get hotels in Everett and Auburn and Renton through King County and some of these other programs, they still have their addiction. And if they get free housing, they still got to go out and do something to afford their $150 a day fentanyl habit.
Right. And we're seeing that all over the place.
Maybe they're not stealing in the downtown Target, but they're going to Tukwila, and they're going to South Center, they're going to Bellevue, they're going to Renton. They have to feed their addiction. Sadly, the number one way people are feeding their addiction for fentanyl right now is prostitution.
Wow. Men
and women of all ages, of all sexual orientation, it does not matter. They are being preyed on by sexual predators who are waving that $20 bill down 3rd Avenue and in the neighborhoods. and people will do anything to not get dope sick. And I have testimonial after testimonial after testimonial that this is nothing short of rape, and we've got to get a handhold on the fentanyl and give these folks treatment. It's not about housing, because they still got to get out there and they got to feed their addiction.
So when you say
we've got to get our hands around that.
And when you say dope sick, that means like kind of weaning off the drug. If you don't take it for a certain amount of time, you get sick because you're not using, correct?
Correct.
Right. Okay. Well, it's sad.
You know, people, it's terrible.
Yeah.
I mean, methadone is available through Evergreen Treatment Services primarily. I have clients who are like, Andrea, I missed my appointment. It was at 6 a.m. Or, geez, I just feels like I'm solving drugs with more drugs. People are reselling methadone. I see it firsthand. So we've just got to find a recovery focused solutions out there. If I was in charge, here's your housing, but get settled in. But by day 90, you've got to be in a 12-step program.
Yeah. What's the difficult? And we'll wrap up here in just a second. But why is it so difficult to make that happen? You get people into housing and they have a place to stay, but you can't put them on a path to make sure that they get clean and sober so that they can live, that life. Why is it so difficult to do that? It seems like it's very tough.
Well, the budget meeting that I sat in with King County Regional Housing Authority last week, which by the way is open to the public, and there were 10 people that signed up for comment. At the very bottom, very small little fine print at the last page was and we'll talk about recovery housing at some point. There was not a big line item for recovery housing. So it's they're not prioritizing money there, and it's an dogmatic, ideological, just get people housing first, and no discussion on substance abuse disorder at all.
Well, hopefully that becomes more of a discussion, and I hope that we can do one of these again in, say, 4 to 6 months, or maybe even sooner than that, just to kind of continue checking in on this and, keeping tabs on this. And then we can bring other people in, hopefully when it's not the holiday season. And then we can have, a few more voices in here and, potentially come up with some solutions right here, and people can learn from this as well. And that's what we really hope for today. I just want to thank you guys so much, John, Andrea, and Tanya, for being part of the discussion here on our virtual town hall here on homelessness. I hope you guys have a great holiday and stay well and stay healthy. And hopefully we can do this again pretty soon and kind of touch base on how things are going in at least a few months here or something like that. Sound good?
Sounds great. Thank you.
Same to you, Preston.
Okay.
Yeah, take care.
All right, thanks so much, guys, and thank you for everybody for watching our virtual town hall on homelessness here in Seattle. I'm Preston Phillips, anchor here at KOMO News. We'll see you next time.